The crimson sun of Xerion 7 cast long shadows across the crystalline wasteland as Marcus Kane's boots crunched through the scattered debris of a civilization dead for millennia. His scanner's persistent beeping had led him 3 clicks from his battered ship, the Wanderer, to this anomaly buried beneath layers of vitrified sand. "Come on, sweetheart," he muttered to his temperamental equipment, giving it a practiced tap. "Don't fail me now." Marcus had been scavenging the Outer Rim worlds for 5 years, ever since the hegemony's taxation reforms had driven him from his family's mining operation on Europa. The ruins of ancient worlds offered better prospects than honest work under the hegemony's boot, and Xerion 7 had been calling to him for weeks. The scanner's tone shifted to an urgent warble as he crested a dune. Below him, partially exposed by recent sandstorms, lay the edge of what could only be a vault. Smooth metallic surfaces untouched by time, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Well, I'll be damned," Marcus breathed, sliding down the dune's face. His heart hammered with the familiar cocktail of greed and fear that accompanied every major find. The vault's entrance was a perfect circle, sealed with what appeared to be liquid metal that rippled like water despite being solid to the touch. His palm scanner couldn't penetrate the material, but as he pressed his hand against the surface, the metal suddenly dissolved inward with a sound like singing crystal. Beyond lay a corridor that gleamed with its own inner light, untouched by dust or decay. Marcus drew his plasma pistol with one hand while activating his helmet's recording function with the other. Marcus Kane, Solo Expedition Log, date 2387.156. "I've found something big on Xerion 7. Really big." The corridor stretched deeper than his light could penetrate, lined with alcoves containing objects that defied classification. But at the far end, bathed in a pillar of soft blue radiance, sat something that made his breath catch. It was beautiful and terrible, a crystalline construct the size of a rifle, but shaped like frozen lightning, all flowing curves and sharp edges that hurt to look at directly. Power hummed from it in waves that made his teeth ache and his vision blur at the edges. As he approached, symbols flickered to life in the air around the weapon, alien script that his translator couldn't parse. But somehow, impossibly, he understood. Their meaning: seekers of the void. Last hope. Choose wisely. The moment his fingers touched the crystal surface, fire raced through his nervous system. Not pain. Something beyond pain, beyond pleasure, beyond any sensation he'd ever experienced. The weapon sang to him in harmonics that resonated in his bones, and suddenly he could feel the vast web of quantum energy that connected all things. The bond was instant and absolute. The weapon was his, and he was its. That's when the hegemony found him. "Step away from the artifact, citizen." The voice boomed through external speakers as armored figures repelled through the vault's entrance. Hegemony Enforcement Division, black armor, neural disruptors, and a complete lack of mercy. Marcus spun, the alien weapon somehow flowing into his grip like it belonged there. "How did you—" "Quantum signature tracking," the lead enforcer said, raising his rifle. "That thing's been broadcasting across 3 sectors. Now put it down before we take it off your corpse." The weapon pulsed in his hands, and Marcus could suddenly perceive the tactical situation with crystalline clarity. 6 enforcers positioned for crossfire, neural disruptors charged and ready. In 3 seconds they would open fire, and in 4 seconds he would be dead. That's when she appeared. The enforcer's helmet exploded in a shower of sparks and metal as something moved too fast to track. Before Marcus could blink, 2 more soldiers were down, their weapons sliced cleanly in half by some invisible blade. She materialized from what seemed like empty air, tall, lithe, with skin that held an opalescent sheen and eyes like molten silver. Her movements were liquid grace as she flowed between the remaining enforcers, striking with surgical precision. In less than 10 seconds, all 6 were unconscious or disarmed. "Impressive," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that matched the weapon's resonance. "The Shard of Eternity chooses its wielders carefully." Marcus kept the weapon trained on her, though some deep instinct told him she meant no immediate harm. "Who are you?" I am Velana of the Kithera, she replied, studying him with those unsettling silver eyes. And you, human, have just awakened, something that was meant to stay buried. She gestured at the crystal weapon. That is not merely a tool. It is a fragment of our people's greatest triumph and most terrible mistake. It chose you, but without proper guidance it will consume you from within. Your species lacks the neural architecture to safely channel its power. What do you want? Marcus asked, though he was already backing toward the exit. The weapon felt warm in his hands, almost alive. To prevent the galaxy from burning, Velana said simply, the hegemony will send everything they have after you now. That weapon could level star systems in the wrong hands, or the right ones for that matter. More voices echoed from the corridor, reinforcements arriving. Velana's expression hardened. Choose quickly, human. Die here with your prize or trust me and perhaps live long enough to understand what you've found. Marcus looked at the approaching lights, then at this enigmatic alien who had just saved his life. The weapon pulsed with warm agreement in his grip. Lead the way, he said. As they fled into the crimson twilight of Zerion 7, Marcus Kane had no idea he'd just made the choice that would reshape the galaxy's destiny and his own heart. The cargo hold of Marcus's ship had never felt smaller. 3 days into their flight from Zerion 7, the Wanderer was cramped with 2 occupants instead of 1, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. Velana sat cross-legged on the deck, her silver eyes closed in meditation while the shard of eternity lay between them. Pulsing with gentle blue light, Marcus paced the narrow space, his body still thrumming with residual energy from their latest training session. Again, she said without opening her eyes. I need a break, Marcus protested, rubbing his temples. The headaches had started on day 1, a side effect Velana claimed of his human brain trying to process Kythera quantum frequencies. The shard doesn't offer breaks, she replied, finally looking at him. Every moment you delay proper bonding, it digs deeper into your neural pathways. Would you prefer to be consumed slowly or quickly? Marcus slumped against the bulkhead. You're a real comfort, you know that? Something that might have been amusement flickered across her features. I am trying to keep you alive, Marcus Kane, though I begin to wonder why. Over the past 3 days he'd learned that Velana was nothing like the alien species depicted in human entertainment. She wasn't coldly logical or mysteriously wise. She was pragmatic, occasionally sarcastic, and possessed a dry humor that caught him off guard. She was also beautiful in a way that made his chest tight whenever she moved with that liquid grace. Because the shard chose me, he said, settling back onto the deck. You said so yourself. The shard has made poor choices before. Velana gestured, for him to place his hands on the crystal. My people created it during the Void Wars when our empire spanned half the galaxy. It was meant to be the ultimate weapon, a tool that could reshape reality itself. As Marcus's palms made contact with the crystal, images flooded his mind. Vast cities of living crystal reaching toward alien stars. Fleets of ships that moved, like schools of fish through hyperspace. And war. Endless, devastating war against something that existed in the spaces between dimensions. The Void Seekers. Velana's voice seemed to come from very far away. They consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space. We fought them for 1,000 years. Marcus saw it all through the shard's memories. Kythera warriors wielding weapons like his own, carving reality apart to drive back an enemy that couldn't be killed, only contained. The final battle that left both civilizations shattered. The Kythera retreating to hidden worlds while the Void Seekers were sealed away. The shards were scattered, Velana continued, and Marcus realized he could feel her presence in his mind now, warm and alien and intimate in ways that made him flush. Most were lost, a few were sealed away on dead worlds waiting. Waiting for what? Marcus asked, though their mental connection let him sense the answer before she spoke it. For someone desperate enough or foolish enough to bond with them completely. Her mental voice carried amusement, and something warmer. The question is which you are. The training session stretched on, Marcus learning to channel the shard's power in controlled bursts rather than wild releases. When he successfully created a stable energy construct, a simple barrier of hardened light, Velana's approval flooded through their link with warmth that made his pulse quicken. "Better," she said aloud, and Marcus was surprised to see genuine pride in her expression. "You learn quickly for a human." "Is that a compliment? From a Kythera?" "Yes." She stood gracefully, and Marcus tried not to notice how the ship's artificial gravity made her movements even more hypnotic. "We should eat. You need to maintain physical strength while your neural pathways adapt." They shared a meal of Marcus's rations, reconstituted protein and vitamin paste that Velana regarded with polite disgust. But she ate without complaint, and Marcus found himself studying the play of light across her opalescent skin. "You're staring," she observed. "Sorry, it's just, I've never met anyone like you. No human has met a living Kythera in 3,000 years. We prefer isolation. Then why help me?" Velana was quiet for a long moment, her silver eyes distant. "Because I was there when the shards were created. I helped forge them, and I've spent millennia watching civilizations rise and fall while hiding from the consequences of our war." She turned to meet his gaze, and Marcus felt something electric pass between them that had nothing to do with the shard's power. "When I felt this one awaken, sensed it bonding to a new wielder." She paused. "I thought perhaps it was time to stop hiding." That night, as Marcus lay in his narrow bunk while Velana meditated in the cargo hold, he couldn't shake the memory of her thoughts intertwining with his during training. The Kythera concept of intimacy was apparently much more literal than human romance, a joining of minds that made physical touch seem almost quaint by comparison. But when he drifted off to sleep, his dreams were filled with silver eyes and the sensation of someone else's emotions bleeding into his own. In the morning, he woke to find Velana standing over his bunk, her expression unreadable. "The connection is deepening," she said simply. "I can feel your dreams." Marcus sat up, suddenly, very aware that he'd been dreaming about her. "Is that normal? For a human?" "No. The shard is adapting you, changing your neural structure to accommodate our bonding techniques." She stepped back, but not before he caught a flicker of something vulnerable in her expression. "It may have unintended consequences." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. Through the viewports, he could see the sleek shapes of hegemony interceptors dropping out of hyperspace. "How did they find us?" Marcus demanded, scrambling for the cockpit. Velana was already moving, the shard floating into her hands with casual telekinesis. "The same way I found you. Quantum resonance tracking." She pressed the weapon back into his grip, and the moment their hands touched, their minds merged completely. For an instant, Marcus experienced everything. Her 3 millennia of memories, her guilt over the Void Wars, her growing fascination with his crude but determined humanity. And beneath it all, something that made his breath catch. The beginning of emotions she hadn't felt in centuries. "Focus," she said, but her mental voice carried warmth that had nothing to do with training. "Show me what you've learned." As the hegemony ships closed in, Marcus raised the shard and felt Velana's presence merge with his own. Together, they were something neither human nor Kythera, something new and dangerous and beautiful. The galaxy was about to find out just how dangerous. 6 months. That's how long Marcus and Velana had been running, and their reputation had spread across 3 sectors like wildfire. The Relic Hunter and his shadow, that's what the bounty postings called them, though the bounty had grown to obscene proportions. Marcus stood at the observation deck of the stolen hegemony corvette Retribution, watching the blue-white swirl of hyperspace while Velana worked at the navigation console. She'd grown comfortable with human technology, her innate understanding of quantum mechanics making her a natural pilot. "The Kepler station should have what we need," she said, her fingers dancing over the controls with unconscious grace. "Black market biomods, identity scramblers, maybe even a ship that isn't broadcasting stolen military vessel to every scanner in the sector." Marcus nodded, but his attention was caught by the way starlight played through her hair when she moved. Over the past months, their mental connection had deepened beyond anything Velana claimed was normal, even for bonded Kythera pairs. He could feel her emotions like echoes of his own, sense her presence even when they were systems apart. "You're doing it again," she said without looking up. "Doing what?" "Broadcasting your thoughts so loudly I can hear them from here." She turned in her chair, silver eyes holding an expression he'd learned to recognize, affection mixed with exasperation. "Your mental discipline is improving, but your emotional control is apparently non-existent," Marcus finished. "So you keep telling me." She stood and moved toward him, and Marcus's pulse quickened despite himself. The months of close quarters, shared dangers, and increasingly intimate mental connections had created a tension between them that neither seemed willing to address directly. "It's not entirely your fault," Valana said, stopping just close enough that he could smell the ozone scent that clung to her skin. "The shard is designed to create deep bonds between wielder and guide. What's unusual is how thoroughly it's working." "Meaning?" Instead of answering, she placed her palm against his chest, and suddenly he was experiencing her memories directly. He saw himself through her eyes. First as a curiosity, a primitive human who'd somehow bonded with technology beyond his understanding. Then as a student whose quick learning and stubborn courage had earned her respect. And finally, in recent weeks, as something else entirely. He felt her growing fascination with human emotions, the way his thoughts blazed with passion and determination, where Kythera minds moved in cool, calculated patterns. He experienced her confusion at finding herself drawn to someone so alien, so brief-lived by her standards. "Valana," he whispered, and she stepped back as if burned. "We should focus on the mission," she said, but her voice carried harmonics of distress that their mental link translated as barely controlled desire. The proximity alarms chose that moment to shriek, and Marcus spun toward the sensor displays. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace, sleek, predatory vessels he didn't recognize. "Korthak's Syndicate," Valana said grimly. "Bounty hunters. Very expensive ones." The lead ship was already hailing them. Marcus accepted the transmission, and a reptilian face appeared on screen, scarred, ancient, with eyes like chips of obsidian. "Marcus Kane," the creature said in accented standard. "I am Vextar, and I've come to collect your head. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick." "Counter-offer," Marcus replied, feeling the shard's power sing through his bones. "Leave now, and I won't turn your ships into scrap metal." Vextar's laugh was like grinding stone. "The hegemony pays well, but the Korthak have been hunting dangerous prey for millennia. You are just another—" Marcus cut the transmission and turned to Valana. "How many?" 3 heavy cruisers, full crews. Probably 40 hunters total." She was already moving toward the weapon lockers. "The shard can handle them, but not without revealing what we really are," Marcus finished. For months they'd been careful to use only conventional weapons, when witnesses were present, hiding the true extent of their capabilities. "The moment we unleash its full power, every faction in the galaxy will know exactly what they're hunting." Veliana pulled on her combat armor, the form-fitting material designed by her people to channel quantum energies. "Are you ready for that kind of attention?" Marcus considered this as the first Korthak ship opened fire, plasma bolts lighting up their shields. Then he thought about the weeks they'd spent in hiding, constantly running, never able to rest. "I'm tired of running," he said. Velana's smile was sharp and beautiful. "Then let's give them something to really fear." They moved to the ship's central corridor, where Marcus could have clear line of sight in all directions. The moment he raised the shard, reality seemed to bend around them. Velana took her position behind him, her hands on his shoulders, and their minds merged completely. This time was different from their training sessions. This time, Velana held nothing back, and the sensation of her consciousness intertwining with his was overwhelming. He could feel her memories, her knowledge, her growing feelings for him blazing like stars in the quantum matrix that connected all things. Through the ship's hull, through the void of space itself, he could sense the Korthak hunters, their bioelectric signatures, their weapons, even their thoughts, and their fear, anticipation, greed. They had no idea what they'd found. Marcus raised the shard and space around the retribution began to fold. The first Korthak ship simply stopped. Its weapons powered down, its engines went dead, its life support systems began cycling through shutdown procedures. Through the quantum link, Marcus could feel the crew's panic as their own ship turned against them. The second ship tried to run, but Marcus reached out with the shard's power and twisted the local spacetime. The vessel found itself flying in circles, trapped in a gravity well that shouldn't exist. Vextar's flagship opened fire with everything it had: plasma cannons, particle beams, even a pair of antimatter torpedoes. Marcus absorbed it all, feeling Velana's presence steady him as energies that could level cities flowed harmlessly around them. Then he struck back. The shard sang with harmonics that made reality shiver, and Vextar's ship began to come apart at the molecular level. Not destroyed, dismantled, each component carefully separated and sorted until what had been a mighty warship became a cloud of perfectly organized debris. Through it all, Velana's mind was merged with his, her thoughts and emotions flowing through their connection. He felt her pride in his growing mastery, her amazement at how naturally he wielded power that had taken her people centuries to develop, and beneath it all something that made his heart race even in the middle of battle, a warm, fierce affection that was growing into something much deeper. When the last Korthak ship limped away, its crew too terrified to continue the hunt, Marcus lowered the shard and turned to find Velana watching him with an expression he'd never seen before. "What?" he asked. "You didn't kill them," she said softly. "You had the power to erase them completely, but you chose restraint. They were just doing a job. My people would have eliminated the threat permanently." She stepped closer, her silver eyes bright with something that made his breath catch. "This is why the shard chose you, I think. Not for your strength, but for your mercy." Before Marcus could respond, she was in his arms, her lips finding his in a kiss that sent quantum harmonics cascading through both their minds. For a moment, that lasted forever, they were truly one being. Human passion merged with Kythera precision, two souls connected by forces that transcended biology. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The galaxy will know what we are now," Velana whispered against his lips. "Good," Marcus replied, pulling her closer. "Let them come. We'll face them together." As news of the Korthak defeat spread across the hyperwave networks, Marcus Kane and Velana had no idea they'd just taken the first step toward becoming legends. The hunt was far from over. It was just beginning. But for the first time since finding the shard, Marcus wasn't afraid of what came next. Not as long as she was beside him. The rebellion had started small, a handful of outer rim colonies tired of hegemony oppression, a few disgruntled military units, some pirates looking for a cause that paid better than random raids. But when word spread that the legendary Relic, Hunter, was leading the resistance, everything changed. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Liberator, a captured hegemony dreadnought that now served as the rebel flagship, watching the tactical display show 73 ships in formation around them. 3 months ago, he'd been a nobody scavenger. Now he commanded a fleet. "The Centauri Defense Fleet is requesting permission to join the formation," reported Commander Hayes, a former hegemony officer who'd defected after witnessing what Marcus could do with the shard. "That brings our total to 81 capital ships." "Approved," Marcus said, though his attention was focused on Velana. She stood at the quantum analysis station, her hands dancing through holographic displays as she coordinated the fleet's movements. The sight of her in combat armor, silver hair flowing around her shoulders as she worked, still made his pulse quicken. Their relationship had evolved dramatically over the past months. What had begun as mutual attraction deepened by their mental bond had become something that transcended human concepts of love. They were partners in every sense, tactical, emotional, and increasingly intimate. The nights they spent together in his quarters were filled with conversations that happened as much through their quantum link as through words, touches that carried the weight of shared thoughts and emotions. "Marcus," Velana's voice carried, both aloud and through their mental connection. "We have a problem." The tactical display shifted to show new contacts dropping out of hyperspace. A massive hegemony fleet, led by a ship Marcus recognized with a sinking heart. The Dominance flagship of Admiral Kronos, the butcher of the Vegan colonies. 200 ships, Hayes breathed. They brought everything. Through their mental link, Marcus felt Velana's complex mixture of emotions, fear for him, determination to fight, and something else. A deep sadness that spoke of secrets still unshared. Velana? She turned to face him, and for a moment their private quantum channel opened completely. What he saw in her memories made his blood run cold. The shard wasn't just a weapon, it was a key. A key to awakening something that had been sleeping in the deep void between galaxies. Every time he used its power, every time they grew closer, he was opening locks that had held for millennia. You knew, he said aloud, causing the bridge crew to look up from their stations. You knew what this thing really was. Velana's expression was stricken. Marcus, everyone out, he ordered. The bridge crew hesitated, looking between him and the approaching enemy fleet. Now! When they were alone, Marcus felt the full weight of her deception crash over him through their link. The shard wasn't meant to defeat the Void Seekers. It was meant to summon them back. The ancient Kithara, facing extinction, had created a weapon that would call their enemies home to finish what they'd started. 3,000 years, Marcus said quietly. 3,000 years you've been waiting for someone to bond with this thing completely enough to activate it. Yes, Velana whispered, and he could feel her anguish like a physical pain. But that was before I knew you, before I understood what you would become to me. The irony was devastating. The deeper their love grew, the stronger their bond became, and the closer the galaxy came to destruction. The final lock opens when two minds merge completely, Velana finished, when the wielder and guide become truly one consciousness. Marcus stared at the approaching hegemony fleet, then at the woman he loved more than his own life. Through their connection he could feel her torment, duty to her people's plan warring with her desperate desire to protect him and the galaxy they'd grown to care about. There has to be another way, he said. There is. Velana stepped closer, her silver eyes bright with unshed tears. If you surrender the shard now, before our bond completes, the locks remain sealed. The Void Seekers stay sleeping. And the rebellion dies. The hegemony wins. Yes. Marcus looked out at the stars, at the fleet of rebels who'd followed him this far, at the hope he'd kindled across dozens of worlds. Then he looked at Velana, beautiful and brilliant and carrying the weight of millennia on her shoulders. Or we could fight, he said, all the way to the end. Marcus. He pulled her into his arms, their minds automatically beginning to merge through the quantum link they'd developed. For a moment they were one being, his human passion and her Kithara wisdom combined into something greater than either could be alone. I love you, he said simply. Whatever comes next, I need you to know that. Velana's response came not in words but in a flood of emotion through their link. Love so fierce it took his breath away, intertwined with fear and hope and desperate determination. The Admiral is hailing us. Hayes's voice came through the Commandant. Marcus straightened, feeling the shard's power singing through his bones. Put him through. Admiral Kronos appeared on the main screen, a man whose cybernetic enhancements had long since replaced most of his humanity. Marcus Kane, your rebellion ends here. Does it? Marcus raised the shard, and reality flickered around them. On the display, several hegemony ships simply stopped working, their systems corrupted by quantum interference. I've gotten stronger, Admiral. Strong enough to fight 200 ships? Strong enough to face what comes after? Kronos's smile was cold metal and circuits. Oh yes, we know what you carry. Ancient alien weapon. Key to powers beyond imagination. Did you think the hegemony's archaeologists were idle? Through their link, Marcus felt Velana's shock. Somehow, impossibly, the hegemony knew about the Void Seekers. Here's my offer. Kronos continued. Surrender yourself and the weapon, and we'll allow your followers to return to their homes. Refuse, and we destroy every ship in your fleet before claiming your corpse. Marcus looked at Velana, at the love and trust in her silver eyes, at the choice that would define everything that came after. Counteroffer, he said, taking her hand and feeling their minds begin to merge completely. Go to hell. As the hegemony fleet opened fire and reality began to reshape itself around the completed bond between human and Kythera, Marcus Kane made his choice. He would face whatever came, void seekers, galactic destruction, the end of everything. As long as Velana was beside him, love, it turned out, was the most dangerous force in the universe, and they were about to prove it. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and space around the Kepler Nebula was littered with the debris of both fleets. Marcus stood in the Liberator's quantum core chamber, the shard of eternity floating between his hands as power beyond measure flowed through him. Velana stood behind him, her consciousness merged so completely with his that he could no longer tell where his thoughts ended and hers began. They had become something unprecedented, a hybrid consciousness that transcended the limitations of both human and Kythera minds. Through the shard, they could feel every ship in both fleets, manipulate matter at the subatomic level, and bend the very fabric of space-time to their will. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of everything. The final lock is opening. Velana's voice echoed in their shared mind space, carrying harmonics of terror and awe. I can feel them stirring in the void between galaxies. Through the quantum matrix, Marcus sensed them too. Ancient consciousnesses awakening from eons of slumber, turning their attention toward this galaxy with the hungry focus of apex predators. The void seekers were coming home. How long? He asked. Hours, maybe less. On the tactical display, Admiral Kronos' remaining ships were regrouping for another assault. 60 hegemony vessels against 30 rebel ships. Odds that would have been hopeless without the shard's power. But now those odds seemed almost quaint compared to what was coming. Sir, Commander Hayes' voice crackled through the comm. We're reading massive quantum distortions at the edge of the system. Something's coming through. Marcus and Velana turned their merged consciousness toward the disturbance, and what they found made their hybrid soul recoil in horror. The first void seeker was already pushing through the dimensional barriers, a thing of living darkness that existed in the spaces between atoms, feeding on the quantum foam that held reality together. Where it touched normal space, stars went out. My God, Hayes whispered as the sensor readings came through. What is that thing? The end of everything, Velana said, her physical voice tight with millennia of accumulated guilt. Unless we stop it. Marcus felt the weight of the choice before him with crystalline clarity. The shard contained enough power to drive back the void seekers, not destroy them, that was impossible, but force them back into their dimensional prison. But using that much power would require him to merge completely with the weapon, becoming its eternal guardian. He would gain the strength to save the galaxy, but lose his humanity forever. There has to be another way, he said. Though their shared consciousness was already calculating the terrible mathematics of the situation. There is, Velana replied, and through their link he felt her resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. But not for both of us. Before he could stop her, she stepped forward and placed her hands on the shard beside his. Immediately, their bond deepened beyond anything they'd experienced, not just minds merging but souls becoming one. The sensation was overwhelming, beautiful, and utterly terrifying. Through their connection, Marcus felt Velana's plan. She would take the burden of the merger on herself, becoming the shard's eternal guardian while he remained human. She had the knowledge and the mental conditioning to survive the transformation. Barely. No, he said aloud, trying to pull back from the connection. Yes, she replied. And suddenly their shared consciousness was flooded with memories. Every moment they'd spent together, every battle fought side by side, every quiet conversation in the small hours of ship's night. This is my choice, Marcus, My people created this mess. Let me be the one to fix it. The Void Seeker was growing stronger, reality warping around its presence as it fed on the quantum structure of normal space. Soon there would be more, dozens, then hundreds, an endless swarm of cosmic predators that would strip the galaxy bare. I won't lose you, Marcus said desperately. You won't, Velana replied. And through their bond he felt the depth of her love, vast and eternal and absolutely certain. A part of me will always be with you, just as a part of you will always be with me. She began the transformation before he could protest further, her consciousness expanding to encompass the shard's vast power matrix. Marcus felt her slipping away, becoming something larger and more alien with each passing second. But even as she changed, even as her physical form began to dissolve into pure energy, her love for him remained constant, a beacon of warmth in the cosmic storm of power flowing through the quantum core. Velana. Remember me, she whispered, her voice now harmonizing with the shard's quantum song. Remember us. The transformation completed in a cascade of silver light. Where Velana had stood, there was now something else. A being of pure energy that contained her memories, her personality, her love, but existed on a scale that spanned star systems. Through the ship's sensors, Marcus watched her new form reach out across space, quantum energies flowing from the shard to encompass the approaching Void Seeker. The two cosmic forces met at the edge of the system, and reality itself rang like a struck bell. The battle was brief, but absolute. The Void Seeker, for all its terrible power, was a creature of entropy and dissolution. Velana had become something else, a force of creation and binding, using the shard's power to weave new quantum structures that the Void Seekers couldn't consume. One by one, she drove them back into the dimensional void, sealing the barriers that had held them for millennia, and adding new locks that would last until the heat death of the universe. When it was over, Marcus found himself alone in the quantum core chamber, holding only empty air where the shard had been. But through the link they'd forged, he could still feel her presence, vast and distant now, but unmistakably Velana. It's done, her voice whispered through quantum space. They're contained. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now you live, she replied, and he could feel her smile across the light years. You build the future we dreamed of. You make the galaxy better. Without you, I'll always be watching, always be here when you need me. Love doesn't end just because the form changes. Marcus looked out at the stars, at Admiral Kronos's fleet hanging motionless in space as both sides tried to process what they'd witnessed. The rebellion would have to continue because the galaxy still needed the hope they'd kindled. But it would be different now. He would be different. I love you, he said to the empty air. And I love you, came the reply, carried on quantum winds that touched every corner of the galaxy, always. As the Liberator turned toward home, toward the long work of building a better future, Marcus Kane carried with him the memory of silver eyes and the certainty that some bonds transcend even death and transformation. The galaxy was safe. The rebellion would continue. And somewhere in the quantum foam that connected all things, Velana was waiting. It was enough. It had to be enough. But on quiet nights when the stars were bright and the ship was still, Marcus could swear he felt familiar hands on his shoulders and heard a beloved voice whispering his name across the vast spaces between worlds. Love, after all, was the one force in the universe that even cosmic powers couldn't destroy.